Hello everyone, welcome back again. Firstly, apologies there hasn't been an update for a couple of weeks. We've had a little bit going on behind the scenes. As you can see, the workshop's been changed around a little bit. There's been a little bit of filming going on, some photo shoots and bits and pieces. There's a little bit of a project happening in the background, which you'll obviously find out about in due course, which is exciting. Unfortunately, it has slowed the progress on FTR 3 and the super cheap auto Falcon for a week or so, but we're back into it again today, so we'll run through where we're up to as of now. So over the last week or so, we've been able to get the diff housing out of FTR 3, and if we come over here, I've got the diff still assembled, so we've just taken it out as one complete unit just to give you a bit of a look at it. So as you can see, the diff housing's all fully fabricated, so it would have been a lot of work going to this. I know some of the costs of some of these housings were astronomical back in the day for what they are, but when you have a look at the amount of work that goes into them, you can understand why. The adjustability on it's incredible, like upper and lower arms. There's all these different mounting points. You've obviously got your watch linkage at the back as well, which adjusts the roll center of the car. So really the adjustability is endless. You can see here the hubs on the end. They're a Harrop hub, and they're got a camber obviously on the rear. So that's set at roughly 3 degrees. I believe they were reground and changed over time, so they may not be 3 degrees anymore, but it just gives you a bit of an idea. And it's still got FTR markings on the hubs, which is pretty cool given the history and the time that's passed since this car was running as an FTR Falcon. The rear brakes are all still on there, as you can see. They're an AP Racing caliper. All the brake lines, pretty simple, just runs along the back of the housing. As you can see there, just goes to a T-junction, and then that hooks up through the floor of the car and then plumbs into the car and back to your master cylinders. As far as the watch linkage goes, really nice bit of engineering again. Doesn't weigh a lot. You look at it and think there'd be a lot of weight in that, but really it doesn't weigh a lot at all. You've just got your rose joints on the outside there where it hooks onto the diff housing, which you can see there where those bolts are. Hooks on there, hooks on there. And again, you've got multiple pickup points where the watch linkage can go into the diff housing. So it's more adjustability again. And how it's adjusted is you just back this bolt off here and it slides up and down, and you can see those markings on the side there, and that affects the roll center of the car. A lot of the cars had it that this was adjustable through the rear window of the car on a cable. I'm not 100% sure whether this car had it. We've got to investigate that just to see what it ran back in the day, or whether that was actually later than this car. When they hit the wall, quite often they'd refer to the watch linkage braking. It either breaks that bolt and the whole diff housing floats backward and forward, or it breaks one of those arms or a bolt. Basically that bolt holds the diff housing lateral, so it doesn't slide backward and forward. One other note, this car has a manual pump on the diff. The Ellery Falcon has a switch inside the car which you can turn the oil cooler on and off as it's required, and it's got an electric motor to do that. This car has obviously an inlet and an outlet on the diff housing, but it's got a manual pump inside the diff, so it pumps oil through the cooler every time the diff's rotating, so it's constantly on. Bit of a different theory to the Ellery car, but it would be just as effective. So another job we've been able to tick off is we've got the boot stripped. Now, as you can see, it looks remarkably different to the last video. So pretty well everything in here, fuel cell, oil tank, fuel pumps, the whole lot's been removed. And it gives us a good idea, whether there's damage in here and what's also going to be required to do the AU conversion. If you did follow the Super Cheap Auto Falcons restoration, you'll recall that pretty well everything from here back has to be removed, and including this bracket here on the parcel shelf. That all needs to be removed to convert it back to an AU because of the screen shape is different between the two models. Not a lot of surprises in here. What's really good and what we were a little bit concerned about is that crossbar that runs between the two shock towers. We're a little bit concerned that may have been modified to suit, obviously to fit a rear passenger seat in there, but according to the drawings we've got and what we can see there, it hasn't been changed. The only modification that has been done is that parallel bar that runs along the top, and it's got, you're probably a little bit hard to see there, but it's got a flat plate welded to the top of it. And if we go around inside the car, you'll see why. And that's where the rear seat and seat belts mounted up for the rear passenger. So that'll need to be deleted. We will have to unpick the firewall at the rear and take all that off, but that'll all go to get it back to how it was back in its racing days. Now if we shoot over this way, I'll just quickly show you the fuel system out of the car. I've just literally removed it and put it down here out of the way, but as you can see, it's split up into 3 segments. And it's really clever how this is done, because if you do have an issue at the track, effectively you can just replace that segment. It's all done ease of use, easy to work on, which is exactly what you're chasing. So you've got this segment here, which has got your lift pumps, which are marked. One of them's actually got a spare pump for FTR 3 on it. So you've got your lift pumps there, which just click off on an electrical connection. They go through to your high pressure pumps. And this segment here has all the wiring harness, and it plugs into the back of the firewall. So this even has your rain light, your brake lights, everything for basically the rear firewall back is all done through this harness. So it's one piece, 4 screws, disconnect the plumbing, and the whole lot comes out. And then obviously you've got your main fuel cell here, which we will have to do some modification work on to fit up the external fuel fillers for the enduro races. But the fuel cell itself is exactly how it was pictured back in the early 2000s. So with the driveline and everything removed from the underside of the car, a lot of the attention now will be on the inside and what we need to do to get the centre section of FTR3 stripped. A lot of little surprises over the weekend that we found. As an example, there was a big heat panel which was bolted to the floor on the passenger side, and then there was a custom piece that ran up over the top of the oil lines. Now if we have a look here, that's what it looks like, which we've taken out of the car. Now there would have been a lot of work going into this, and it was purely there just to protect the passenger from the heat coming up from the exhaust. And when we removed that, there was a second section which is underneath the car, which is full of packing there, as you can see, of insulation, heat-proof material, and that sat between the exhaust and the floor, just to try and keep the heat out of the passenger or away from the passenger of the car. All that is really, really heavy, so there was no way that was in the car when it raced. So that's been removed and that'll never get used again. And a few other little things that we've discovered. So obviously the oil lines and that run straight through the center of the car, and they go up all the way through to the engine bay. The fuel lines, if I go back to the back of the car, it's probably the best way to show you. So you've got those 2 little fittings there, the 2 big ones, this is looking through the boot. The 2 big ones are your oil system, the 2 small ones are your fuel system. That goes through the firewall inside the car. And then all of a sudden it does a 90-degree bend and it disappears again. And if you follow it through here, it then pops up and goes back along the rails all the way to the front of the engine or down to the engine bay. Now the reason this was done, this isn't original. Obviously they didn't want to have a fuel system sitting under, or fuel line sitting under the passenger seat at the rear. So we'll have to delete this and return it back to how it was, because it did go through that firewall and then connect directly to those lines. It didn't go under the car. So just little bits and pieces like that. We're just making notes as we go, because a lot of this will have to be tidied up at the fabrication stage, like the rear seat mount. That's all got to go. We don't want to get the chassis painted and then realise that we should have done a hell of a lot more welding and patch up work. Everything in here, as you see it, will be torn out of the car. Obviously the dash, everything's going to come out, pedal box. So this will all happen over the next few days. And then hopefully we'll have a bare chassis, and then we can start to ship FTR3 off to get some major engineering work done on the cage. So hopefully over the next week or so, we'll have FTR3 completely stripped and ready to go into the fabrication phase. As you can see, there's a few bits and pieces in the engine bay, but nothing too major, just oil lines, brake lines and bits and pieces which will all come out. Top control arms will be removed from the car as well, and then we can really step into that fabrication stage. We're not 100% sure yet whether we're going to convert the car back to an AU and then ship it off to be, have the cage redone, or we'll do the cage and then convert the car. It really comes down to availability of a good engineer that can do the work for us on the cage. And if they're available, we'll no doubt take that path straight away. So hopefully we'll have some more news for you in the next few days, and stay tuned, and thanks again for your support.